always find that there's something that I want to tell, and there's something that needs to be changed, and I want to be the one to help change that.
Shachar Peled, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you?
Happy to be wonderful, as you can see in the Galilee right now, so no complaints.
I love it. You know, COVID-19 is horrible. It's horrific, and it's disturbing so many lives. But I have to say that I am thankful that I get to have people like you on the show, people that are so incredibly busy in the day to day. And your response to my request is saying, "Well, you know, I'm in quarantine, so we might as well because I have some time now." So I want to thank you first of all for being so generous with your time. Shachar, I have so much to learn over these next 20 minutes, so I'm really gonna go fast and I'm gonna cram you with questions because there's just so many things that I want to learn. First of all, you know,
Yes, I'm used to being on the other side, so I'm ready for your questions.
I love it. Okay, so you know you're a journalist by profession now. You said multimedia journalist, so you cover, you know, agnostically all sorts of different industries. You studied at Columbia University after serving in the elite intelligence units in Israel. You know, been with CNN, European correspondent now for Channel 13, but you're also part of the launch team for Ep124 News, right?
That's all true. Yes, I
Amazing. Okay, so I
usually
got that right. But Shachar, now it's your turn. Walk me back through your journey. How do you transition from being a researcher in the intelligence unit to being a journalist?
right. So it was actually a very it felt very natural, the transition. If you think about it, being in intelligence is all about working with sources and writing reports and working with a tight knit group of people. And what I actually realized I wanted to do is continue that story in order to shed light on various issues, but on a wider basis. So journalism was a very natural shift from what I was doing in the military and in the prime minister's office.
Right.
And I found myself, I was debating, you know, at 22, as most of us do in Israel, debating what my path in life will be. And I realized that storytelling and doing it to wide audiences and, you know, unearthing stories that I've never heard about and have this wow element to them, but that more than 10 people can read them because they're not top secret, was what I was meant to do. And I started pursuing that route. So right after my studies, I worked for Channel 2 News, which was the largest, and still is, the largest commercial news channel in Israel. From there, I had the amazing opportunity to be part of this media startup,
Right.
I-24 News, the first ever international multi-language channel in Israel. I personally grew up, my upbringing was in London, so I had good English, and this channel was looking for native English speakers, French speakers, and Arabic speakers, so I could get this opportunity to become an on-air correspondent, which I did for about 3 years.
Wow.
And from then shifted on to life in New York. As you mentioned, my master's in Columbia Journalism School, which was a ride in its own right. A career in CNN,
Yeah.
both in New York and in London.
Wow.
And now I'm usually based in Europe right now, quarantined in Israel.
Of
But
course.
this shift has been a roller coaster and a wonderful ride.
Shachar, I want to learn a little bit more about your take on this idea that you're unearthing stories within the IDF and the Prime Minister's office. You mentioned these are stories that are read by 10 people. And now you're shifting to unearthing stories that are going to be watched by dozens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. So talk to me about that shift. And I want to hear a little bit about your take on the responsibility that you hold on unearthing these stories, because like we just talked before we started, I'm looking at the work that you're doing and I'm saying, okay, well, I'm watching you cover this story. You covered the story of Eritreans in Israel, right, with the protests back then. And I watched that story and it was phenomenal. And then I kept thinking to myself, like, wow, these were amazing 5 minutes. I learned so much, but there must be another 1,000 minutes that I didn't hear about, right? and you hold the responsibility of choosing which 5 minutes to show. So talk to me a little bit about that responsibility.
Right, so I'll take you to a quick glimpse to behind the scenes of
Please.
what's happening really when you do either a print or digital story, and definitely in broadcast. There are hours and hours of footage. Usually, the more the merrier. You want to try and make a deep dive into any story you encounter. And one of the reasons I became a journalist was to every day learn new things, and one day be in the kitchen with this chef who's doing these creative things, and the other day being in a terror act zone and covering things that happen, that are breaking news. And the shift from cultural to politics to technology to social issues is so wide and so vast that I found it fascinating, and I still do till this very day. And so I love doing this deep dive into stories, but you also have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of paper. Digital, not so much, but today you still have to limit the amount of words that you publish.
No, especially for my generation, the scrolling generation, if these are not 1 minute bites, it's hard to capture attention, and it's almost there's a conflict of interest that's saying, on one hand I want to capture the attention with the clickbait, on the other end I want to be responsible and say truthful information, right?
That's very true. And what you want to do is keep the essence of the story. So if I'm covering a protest of migrants and asylum seekers,
Yes.
or if I'm doing a story about this one specific artist, I'm always looking at what the message is that
Right.
I'd like to convey, what the other person, what the story that they're telling is. And I've been very grateful and thankful that I was able to tell some stories that actually create change. And that's what I would like to do personally as a journalist. There's this I guess stigma of journalists being objective. There's always this, you can't put your feelings into things. It's no longer the when I studied journalism and I personally worked that way, I always find that there's something that I want to tell, and there's something that needs to be changed, and I want to be the one to help change that. And especially working for CNN, that was prominent when we tell a story that then, as you said, hundreds and thousands of people can see. We created change. One of the stories I did that I'm most proud of is highlighting Holocaust survivors that live in poverty in the US. It's a very well-known, well-covered issue in Israel.
Yes.
It's being treated. But in the United States of America, the empire of capitalism, if you're poor, you're poor, and you need to, lift yourself up. But when we're talking about Holocaust survivors, most of them over 80, 85 years old, this was surprising to me, that they have no structure and no some kind of institution that is taking care of them from the state, from the federal level. And after doing this story, we've received multiple individuals, calls from individuals, from organizations, from nonprofits.
Wow.
Who said, I want to lend a hand, I want to help, can you connect me to these individuals? I want to do something about this. So that's just one example of how and I spent hours and hours with these people, but the essence was to tell their very specific story in order to get them help, or tell another story's awareness, or tell another story that would create some kind of initiative. These are all things that I'm very passionate about.
And how do you even uncover these stories? So, growing up as an Israeli in Tel Aviv and now in the Bay Area, I have family that perished in the Holocaust, and I'm very versed in the history of it, but I never even stopped to think that yes, in the US also we have Holocaust survivors that might not be that don't have the structure in this capitalist society that Israel provides or is aiming to provide currently to Holocaust survivors. How do you go about unearthing these stories and really understanding their value? Because part of the idea here is that you're unearthing things that are not mainstream, right?
Right, and I was actually very fortunate to be the outsider when I was working in the CNN newsroom in New York specifically. I was the only Israeli. Actually, I was the only foreigner.
Wow.
Everyone there was American, and our specific department was about 50, 60 people, and that actually allowed me to be, sort of the one that brings in these alternative stories, things that others didn't look at, and it was actually an amazing time. It was at the height of the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump campaigns, and there was a lot of focus on xenophobia, on the other,
Yeah.
on immigrants, on asylum seekers, and in addition to that being a fascinating topic for me, I also found myself bringing years that were different from the regular mindset. And because CNN allowed me this amazing opportunity to just, here's a camera, go out and explore Boise, Idaho, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and all these places I've never heard of, and suddenly had this opportunity to cover the campaigns there and how people were reacting. There was this whole issue with North Korea, obviously, and then we started interviewing North Korean asylum seekers in the US, which
Wow.
was fascinating. And it was only because I think I was the outsider that I was looking for these outsider stories. So that was a great opportunity.
That's just incredible. And I mean, are there specific things that you're particularly excited about as you go about? Is it the filming of it, the interviewing, the researching, the computer, or is it the post production, helping the editors put the story together? Which part of it are you most excited?
Oh, that's like choosing between mom and dad. It Well, especially in the past couple of years when I've been really just a one woman band. I've been the correspondent, the photographer, the
Really?
researcher, the producer. It's unfortunately and fortunately only me. So I'll give you an example. We were in Paris when the Notre Dame caught on fire, and obviously was a historic and devastating moment. And at that point, obviously it's just me. By chance, I was with my tripod and camera with me, and what I needed to do at that moment, breaking news, and I'm on air all the time, I had to do this combination of filming myself, reaching out and asking people and the police, women and men that were there, what was going on, interviewing, being in touch with the control room. These are all things that the producer, the
Oh my
camera person
God.
does, the researcher does, and the reporter usually do. Thankfully, my husband was there to help me carry around the tripod here and there. But most of these things I do by myself, and I love it. There's a lot of adrenaline, but I also will admit it's a big challenge. Sometimes it's I'm so exhausted by the end of the day that I'm asking myself, why do I do this? But then the following day comes, and there's another story to cover.
To me, it sounds like you're ready to transition from this to running the control room for a NASA launch because it doesn't sound too different at this point. Those two
By
things.
all means, just give me the control pad. I'll take care of everything.
How long does it take from the moment that you understand that there is some potential for something? Yeah, there might be something in Arkansas that we might want to cover. This is interesting. To the moment where it actually gets aired to millions of viewers on CNN and you
Yeah.
get the message across. How long does that process take?
It really depends. So if you're talking about CNN, again, it's a huge, well-oiled machine. They have the resources to just say, even we're not sure there's a story there, but here are plane tickets or a train ride or a car or the accommodation that you need.
Right.
To just there's a story there. There was one sort of murder mystery I did driving for like 5 days through. It was Connecticut, Massachusetts, I think Rhode Island, a few states
Yeah.
there in the northeastern part of the US, just to try and chase a story and see if there's bulk and anything that we can actually create content from. So it really depends. And this was from one day to the next. Just, Shachar, are you ready on Tuesday to take the car and just go on a road trip around these states to see if there's a story? Others, it might take time. If we have time to plan ahead and see in advance if we can do one story or another, then we do the planning. Most of the time, it's not even from one day to the next. Now with Channel 13, as you know, in Israel, everything's last minute, and we can sometimes decide from 1 hour to the next that I'm on this flight to Germany to cover a story, or
Incredible.
wherever I need to be across Europe.
It sounds exhausting and exhilarating at the same time, and
It absolutely is. Yeah, it's
that's
correct.
no, that's just incredible. And looking down at how you're now operating in these, you operate in different places, and I'm really curious to hear your take on the transition of journalism to the different generations. And I'm looking at, I'm even looking at my nieces who are, now a few days old, 3 years and 6 years old, and the way that they're consuming information, not necessarily news, but any information, is drastically different than the way that I'm even consuming it. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your take on how journalism is changing and adapting to the younger generations. And I believe you asked this question to the person who ran BBC News, right? And so I'm especially curious to hear your answer.
Well, you did your research.
I'm
So
speaking to a journalist. I had to prepare a little bit.
right, very true. I'm very impressed. The phrase from Pixar's Ratatouille, everyone can be a chef or everyone can be a cook. These days, I feel like everyone can be a journalist. You need the basic tools and obviously some experience, but with the platforms that exist today to reach everyone and anyone at any time. It's also, the danger, and we can spend hours talking about misinformation and disinformation, but it's also an amazing opportunity to spread stories and reach so many people so very quickly. And I look at myself today. I consume news mostly from social media, and I'm not talking only about Facebook or places where you can add a lot of text and explain the story. Instagram today,
Yes.
Twitter, even TikTok these days. You can learn so much from these platforms in terms of just even getting a new initiative or inspiration from seeing someone doing something and saying, hey, that's new, or I've never heard or seen anyone do that thing before, or ask those questions before, and want to do a story from that or get information from that. And I think anyone who's serious today in news has presence in all of these platforms, because that's where we get the news, and this is a way to spread news as well. So without a doubt, social media, TV still exists, as does radio. I can't say that much about print, but
Right.
but everything that has to do with social media today, and the platforms know it. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, all the big digital giants, that they know that's where people consume their news and their information, and that's what they do. They are now putting more and more focus on
Right,
how
right.
to stop misinformation and become a truthful, justifiable news platform.
Right, so I agree. I mean, we can talk for hours about the dangers of misinformation and fake news that come with the democratization of dissemination of information. But what I'm especially curious is, do you believe that 10 years or 15 years from now, we will need reporters to be in front of the Notre Dame in case something happens, or is it enough that we'll have people holding their whatever device they'll use, if it won't be already in our glasses, and talk while they're watching it? Is there still room for in-field journalism in 10, 15 years if I become a journalist simply by the virtue of me having a phone?
I actually thought that you were about to ask me if robots, and for that I have a very quick answer. But
so
what
no,
you
let's
are
start with,
asking,
because your question is more interesting. So just start with the robots one.
Well, with robots, what we can see today is that even with the basic levels of AI that we have today, it's not giving us stories. When I go to YouTube, and even if you make it better and the aggregation of information will be better, then you won't get the levels of depth and investigation that you want from what currently AI can do. And I don't see that improving in 10 years. We can talk about 50, but to answer your question, um, I think that yes, anyone can become a journalist, but you have to have the I think the still the it's all about trust. So you have to have the backing and the support of some kind of system that people trust. So you can be an individual and start reporting, and if what you are unveiling is found to be truthful, interesting, new, all the basics and the fundamentals of news, of course you can become a journalist. It's all about practice and experience of how to
Right.
ask the right questions and how to address. You need that, but very much so in journalism it's on-job training, and I'm saying that as someone who has a master's in journalism. Most of what I do right today is not from school, it's from being in the field, and I think yes, an individual can do that, but it's obviously helpful when you have the New York Times or the New Yorker or the Washington you as not only a support system, but as a way of others to trust you.
Wow.
So I think in 10 years that would still be the case.
Shachar, this was inspiring, and I learned so much over these past 20 minutes. I want to thank you again for being so generous with your time. Before we finish, I have to ask you the most important question: 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Right, so I thought very hard on that question because it's very, very difficult. So I guess the first, which is a new word for me, would be mother. Since
Congratulations.
I have a 6-month-old sunshine. And it's not only mother, if I cheat a bit, it's being a family person, a family woman, because it's my dear husband, my partner, and my son, who are now definitely defining myself and my life. The second word would be storyteller, and I don't need to elaborate on that. I think we've done that for 20 minutes now. And the third, what was the third? I think it's difficult because it's trying to describe myself, but
Of course.
it could be, I don't want to cheat. It could be anything from being
I'd let you cheat a little bit.
Okay, thank you. So anything from being multidisciplinary to just being honest, an honest person. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's a bit bad. But yeah, I guess that describes it best.
Shachar, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. This was inspiring. Enjoy the quarantine. I see that throughout the filming of this episode, it got dark over there. So in that case,
it did. Right.
But thank you very, very much, and I look forward to continue seeing the stories that you unfold.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Wonderful.